The Olympic Games in Paris have once again raised the issue of double standards in international sports. While the International Olympic Committee has banned countries, including Russia, for their human rights violations, Israel has been allowed to compete despite its relentless assault on Gaza.
That Israel is violating international law, and the IOC isn't following the lead of these international organizations. It's out of step with the rest of the United Nations system.
Hello, I'm Rida Fakhri. Welcome to Bigger Than Five. Today we explore the intersection between sports and politics and ask, have major global sporting events like the Olympic Games become political tools used to advance Western agendas? Historically, countries like apartheid South Africa were banned from participating in the Olympics. In stark contrast, Israel, which was recently declared an apartheid state by the International Court of Justice, continues to compete, raising questions of double standards and hypocrisy. The International Olympic Committee banned Russia and Belarus from participating in the Paris Olympics because of the war in Ukraine, but refused to take similar steps with Israel over its actions in Gaza. So why has Israel been given a free pass while others are being sanctioned?
But I guess because it doesn't fit the narrative of the media of the West, we couldn't talk about it. But now that we can talk about the Ukraine, we can talk about Palestinians. So please keep that in mind.
When it was Ukraine, everybody wake up. But they are Muslim, so everybody is neutral. It's not possible to accept that.
We are trying to do the best in France as much as we can with the repression that we have, knowing that there is the double standard here.
What we are asking for right now is for Israel not to participate to the Olympic Games.
Israel should be expelled because it is systematically violating rights and international laws. So it must be expelled from these Olympic Games, just like it happened to Russia.
So what's behind the selective implementation of the International Olympic Committee's rules? Joining me now to discuss this is Dima Youssef, who was until earlier this year captain of the Palestinian national women's football team. Dima Youssef, as someone who has represented the Palestinian national women's football team at the international level, just how important is it for Palestine to be represented today at the Olympic Games? What does it mean for you?
For Palestinian athletes, sports for us is far more than just a neutral field or a sports ground. Every match, every training session, every international event is a testament of our existence and of our resilience as well. We face numerous difficulties as Palestinian athletes due to the occupation and due to the practices by the Israelis. So for us, just being there representing our country is a big success for us, and it's one of the most important things we do, is a way of resistance for us as well as athletes.
How do you think the Palestinian Olympics team, many of them your colleagues, are feeling today, given the ongoing assault on Gaza, but also the fact that they may have to compete against Israeli athletes in Paris?
Exactly. So just to be in Paris right now with what we're going through as a Palestinian nation, the ongoing genocide in Gaza with many athletes being targeted, more than 400 athletes have been murdered in this ongoing war in Gaza. It's really hard for them. I'm pretty sure it's a big responsibility to be representing a country that's going through a lot right now. So that on its own is a big thing. It takes a big heart to be able to carry that weight. at the same time, just having to face, or maybe the possibility of facing Israeli opponents doesn't make it's for us is against all standards, against everything that the sports international sports bodies have been talking about. They've talked about in their charters. The Olympic Charter as well has stated multiple times that if you break, for example, the Olympic truce, you should not be able to compete. We've said that multiple times. We don't think that Israeli athletes have the right to compete in the Olympics, and we've stated that multiple times. But we haven't had any form of agreement from the other sport bodies, which shows a big double standard in the way different political contexts have been taken into consideration when it comes to sports.
Why do you think this has been the case?
Well, to be honest, we don't think it's fair. We don't think it's right, and that's something we stand by. We believe that Israeli sports federation have broken FIFA laws, have broken the Olympic Charter laws as well, and they should be held accountable for that. But at the same time, we understand that there's a complexity when it comes to the situation in Palestine. Which is something we don't understand, we don't agree with. We've in the PFA and the Palestinian Olympic Committee, we've filed multiple complaints. We've asked for the Israeli team to be expelled from the competition, but nothing has been done. We think there's a way of discrimination against Palestinian people. This has been systematic and has been ongoing for a really long time as well. And we've delivered multiple information. We've documented a lot of violations against the Olympic Charter, but nothing has been done. So it's very frustrating. But at the same time, we hope that that those facts will be taken into consideration and something needs to be done.
Should some of the Israeli athletes, at the very least, have been disqualified from these games, given the fact that some of them, we know, have served in the Israeli military, and others have shown very strong vocal support for Israel's military actions in Gaza?
Of course, we've said that many times. We have names of athletes that have been competing right now. One of them plays. He's an Israeli judo champion, and he has played in this tournament so far. For us, it doesn't make any sense that he's competing. This guy sent rockets, and he signed rockets with his name, and he said with love to the children of Gaza. This is inhumane. This is unacceptable, and should be disqualified immediately. This has been done as well when it came to the to suspending some Russian athletes as well. Due to their political stance on the invasion of Ukraine, which is something we don't see is been treated equally regarding or in affairs to the Israeli athletes. This is something that's very surprising to us, and it has no basis.
Why do you think Israel has not been subjected to the same moral standards as Russia?
Of course, a sports organization often promote for values of fairness, equality, and peace. And their actions actually contradict with these principles when it comes to Palestinian athletes. We've seen this multiple times. There has been different cases where Palestinian athletes have been targeted, and Israeli athletes who've done that, or Israeli official sports bodies, have been found guilty of doing illegal practices. They've never been held accountable. This is not just in the sports context as well. This is also has been done in different political contexts as well. So for us, just the ICG ruling, the recent one condemning Israel as an apartheid state, also plays a big factor. And it should for us, they should have been suspended at least from the Olympic participation.
When you look at the selective approach that you've just outlined, how much of it is driven, in your opinion, by the West's political agenda? How big a role do special business interests have in this?
Of course, sports for Palestinians is more than just sports. Everything is political. Everything has a political aspect of it. From the obstacles we face as Palestinian athletes to us competing internationally. The same goes for Israeli athletes as well. They've always been treated specially. They've always been given a special excuse. And again, we've documented many violations, but nothing has been done. Of course, everything is controlled by the media. Everything is just like looked at one-sided, and it's something we do not accept.
How much do you think the mainstream media's portrayal of what is going on in Gaza has affected and shaped public and institutional perceptions about the fairness of Olympic participation?
I mean, it's very obvious, to be honest. Everything we've done as athletes, as people who have been outspoken about their support of Palestinian athletes, we have seen a lot of transformation when it comes to the public opinion. A lot of people have been in support of us, but they're mostly the public, which is something very important for us. We feel like there's a big power behind that, and that's something that can shape future decisions. But up to this point, this has not been made. We think that we do have enough proof to suspend those athletes, and we don't have enough proof and evidence to suspend Israeli athletes from participation. But until this point, this has not been made. But we're still working on it. Like, it's a work in progress.
Over 300 Palestinian athletes, as you mentioned at the beginning, were murdered by Israel in Gaza. Some estimates put that number at 400. There have been absolutely no consequences. 266 footballers, including 3 on the national team. Again, why this impunity?
Exactly. Those are the questions we ask ourselves as Palestinian athletes every day. We do not have any kind of protection as athletes, as from international sports organizations. We do feel some solidarity from nations, from the normal public, but we believe that a lot of people are scared to speak out for Palestinian athletes and for Palestinian sports, and a lot of that's because the power is in the hands of those who are in support of the other party. So we don't feel like it's a free world anymore, to be honest. Not even in support of Palestinian athletes, or just the idea of protection for athletes in general. We believe that we Palestinian athletes should be protected under the international sports organizations, but this has not been done. We know that Palestinian athletes and historically have not been treated fairly when it comes to international competitions or just given a chance. But at the same time, we're a resilient people. That's all we have as Palestinian people. This is part of our nationality, and we fight. We keep fighting till the end. This is what we've been doing as athletes, and we will keep fighting until we get what we think is right.
The IOC claims it is politically neutral. You clearly don't see it that way.
We clearly do not see that. We've seen different previous actions from the IOC, disciplinary actions against nations who have broken the Olympic truce, for instance, people who have broken the Olympic charter, but nothing when it comes to Israeli athletes or Israeli federations. So it's definitely not. It's definitely one-sided, and it's definitely double standards when it comes to Palestinian athletes.
All right, Dima Youssef, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The Olympic Games, a symbol of global unity and peace, have a long history of banning countries. In 1920, following World War I, several nations, including Germany and Austria, were not invited to the 1920 Olympics in Belgium. In 1948, following World War II, Germany and Japan were barred from taking part in the London Olympics. In 1964, South Africa was banned from the Olympic Games in Tokyo because of its apartheid system of institutionalized racial segregation. The ban lasted until 1992. In 1980, more than 60 countries joined the US-led boycott of the Olympic Games in Moscow in protest of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In 2024, Russia and close ally Belarus are banned from competing in the Paris Olympic Games under their country's flags. A limited number of athletes from both countries are competing as individual neutral athletes. Joining me now to discuss the implications of these double standards on international sports and human rights is Nikki Dryden, who was part of Canada's swimming team at 2 consecutive Summer Olympics. She's currently a human rights lawyer. Nikki Dryden, considering that the IOC has historically banned countries like apartheid South Africa, what justifies, in your view, the fact that the IOC took no such measures with Israel, especially after the International Court of Justice labeled Israel as an apartheid state?
Yeah, it's sort of one of those things that's not surprising when you look at the history of the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. So even though there is historical precedent, as you mentioned, where it was the whole sporting world that actually came together with a whole bunch of other economic and other types of political sanctions that ended apartheid in South Africa. And the sporting movement played a big role in that. The IOC also did it with the Taliban-led Afghanistan in the early 2000s. They were banned because of gender apartheid. So there is precedent. But the reason that they aren't doing it this time is really because they don't have a consistent framework that they use. In my mind, it should be a proper human rights framework that complies with international law that would allow them to make these really difficult decisions on a regular basis that's consistent.
As a human rights lawyer yourself, as someone who has competed in the Olympics, how do you view this selective implementation of the IOC's charter when countries like Russia are banned because of violations of international law and human rights, and other countries like Israel are not banned for similar, if not far more egregious violations?
Yeah, and it makes no sense. If you, I think the hardest thing as an Olympian is that I actually do want to work hard to protect the Olympic movement. For me, I actually do believe in all of those goodwill things that the IOC sells in order to bring in corporate sponsors and, when they're promoting the Olympic Games. One of the conditions of participation for the Paris 2024 Olympics, which is what all the athletes and all the other participants had to sign a document that says that it contains a commitment to respect the Olympic Charter, including the peace mission of the Olympic movement. And so on this one hand, they have this whole promotion of peace. There's the Olympic truce, which we can talk about, and yet they aren't consistently applying their own rules.
And the fact that they're not,
they're
not, and that there is this blatant selective implementation of the IOC's own charter, I mean, does it risk undermining its stated goal of promoting peace and protecting athletes from all nations?
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what I worry about, right? And so, these are difficult decisions. And I think, this year in particular, this last 2 years have been very difficult years for the International Olympic Committee, trying to figure out how to navigate this very complex world. You have all of these amazing tools at your disposal, including the United Nations apparatus. So one of the things that really frustrates me is that we have allowed the Olympic truce to be broken by the Russian government 3 times. So Putin, the invasion of Georgia came in 2008 during the Olympic truce period. The invasion of Crimea came during 2014, and then we have the Ukraine invasion in 2022.
If Russia is banned from participating in the Olympics because of the war in Ukraine, should the same apply to Israel because of its assault on Gaza?
I think especially so when you have the International Court of Justice coming out and basically saying that the occupation of Palestine and certain areas is considered apartheid and has and that the IOC is part of that UN system. They take a lot of benefit from the United Nations system, multilateral system, and they're not giving it back. So we have these international institutions that are saying that that Israel is violating international law, and the IOC isn't following the lead of these international organizations. It's out of step with the rest of the United Nations system.
Why is it? Why this moral inconsistency?
My feeling with this decision is less about them having some ulterior motive when it comes to Israel-Palestine, and more about their lack of actually believing in the United Nations system and the international human rights framework and international law. It's not embedded in the way they do business. It's written on paper, but they aren't making decisions.
How much intellectual dishonesty is there, though, when the IOC claims to be politically neutral, when it claims that politics and sports cannot mix according to the charter?
It is the most political event that could possibly happen. So I just roll my eyes when I hear this concept that sport and politics don't mix. They are perfectly matched, which is why it is so critical that the IOC is held to a higher standard and a consistent standard. So when they do apply rules that are different than what they're regularly doing, which they've done with athletes from Russia and Belarus, they should be doing it. They should have a proper framework for how they make that decision. And if the decision was based on the unlawful invasion of Ukraine, then the same decision needs to apply to Israel and Gaza.
It's been widely documented that the Israeli flag bearer, Peter Polchik, signed bombs that were about to be dropped on Gaza with these words, "From me to you with pleasure." Is that enough grounds to disqualify this athlete? And what do you make of other athletes who serve in an army that's actively engaged in war crimes?
Yeah, it's deeply disturbing. It's really horrible. It's really horrible to hear that word spoken to any human being, and to think that an Olympic athlete could be doing that. I mean, they're humans. If that's true, it's really sad and horrible, and that's certainly not what the Olympics represent. And I think where the inconsistency is that the same athlete from Russia had to agree with the following: they couldn't actively support the war in Ukraine, otherwise they would become ineligible to compete. And the same with support personnel, right? And then on top of that, athletes who were contracted to the Russian or Belarusian military, they wouldn't be allowed to compete as well.
Where does all this leave the integrity and impartiality of the Olympic Games?
I love watching the athletes compete. But I think it's really important for everybody to be holding the International Olympic Committee to account. And that includes corporate sponsors who have a role to play in this.
Let me ask you this then. Does it boil down to the IOC protecting its own interests? It's a very lucrative business. We know that the IOC, the Olympic Games, are a corporate giant trying to sell a product with very lucrative broadcasting deals, advertising contracts. In fact, the sponsorship revenues have jumped from 500 million in 2000 to about 3 billion today.
It's definitely not a for-profit entity. I mean, even though it's set up as one in Switzerland, I mean, it's certainly the purpose of the International Olympic Committee is to make a lot of money. Now, they would argue that then they disperse that money to the through the Olympic movement, through their solidarity program. But up until very recently, they've never really revealed how, when, where, who gets that money. The thing that frustrates me regularly, though, is they are selling this particular version of the Olympic Games. They are selling a dream that's not necessarily true. And, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, do you watch the opening ceremonies? No, I mean, that's the worst part of it for me, because I want to watch the athletes compete. I still believe in that.
You mentioned the opening ceremony, and the organizers of that ceremony we're speaking about, quote, our shared humanity. How much shared humanity was there when you consider the ban on women wearing the hijab who wanted to compete just like everyone else in these Olympics?
One of the biggest holes in the Olympic movement is that athletes don't have a real voice. There's a token group of athletes on the Athletes Commission, but unlike professional sports, Olympic athletes are not unionized. And I believe that this will be the hill that the IOC dies on, protecting the Olympic movement from athlete unionization.
But does the hijab ban go against the Olympic Charter?
Yes, totally, 100%. Yeah.
And why has there been complete silence?
The Olympic Charter just contains a lot of threats to athletes if they were to do something wrong. So if a French athlete decided to wear the hijab, on court, for example, in a basketball game during the Olympics, she should be protected because the Olympic Games in Paris, the three entities that are responsible for delivering that Olympics, the City of Paris, the French National Olympic Committee, and then the International Olympic Committee, they signed a contract that said we will abide by international human rights law. And so that woman should be protected. But there's no mechanism for her to go within using the Olympic Charter or the rules of the Olympic Games. There's no way for her to actually receive remedy and to exercise her human rights.
The IOC often likes to remind us that one of its key objectives is to build a better world. Is it even remotely interested in a better world? How do you see the future of the Olympic Games and the IOC?
For me, a better world through sport is one where every athlete that wants to, you know, participate, and that can start at like a very basic grassroots level all the way to elite sport, can do so in a safe way. They're not being abused. Their human rights aren't being violated. They're not being racially discriminated against. At the end of the day, it's about athletes having an opportunity to compete, come together, because there are some great things about the idea of athletes getting together from all over the world and sharing differences and sharing our similarities. But, you know, if it continues on in this manner where we say one thing and we do another, I can't see the longevity of the Olympic movement.
All right, Nikki Dryden, great to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over the last few decades, several countries have been banned from participating in the Olympics due to actions that the International Olympic Committee has deemed to be in violation of the Olympic Charter. Yet, in the case of Israel, the IOC stance appears to be both inconsistent and hypocritical. The IOC banned South Africa for its apartheid policies in 1964, yet 60 years later, Israel, a legally recognized apartheid state, faces no such consequences. Despite the killing of hundreds of Palestinian athletes and accusations of war crimes and genocide, Israel was allowed to participate at the Paris 2024 Olympics. Is the IOC upholding its own principles, or is it selectively applying them based on political convenience? These blatant double standards raise critical questions about the integrity of the Olympics and other major sporting events as symbols of global unity and peace. That's all from Irida Fakhri and the team. Thanks for watching.